This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. You might want to buckle up. We've got a lot of stuff to get through, which could have been said any day this year, really. Health experts are cautiously optimistic about this flu season as the weather drops and people head indoors for the winter during a deadly pandemic. We'll tell you why. Plus, more Catholic women are considering religious life than the previous generation. We take a call from one of our own as he walks in the light with a millennial nun in training. But first, here's what you need to know right now. The maker of Oxycontin pleaded guilty to 3 federal criminal charges for its role in contributing to the country's devastating opioid crisis. Purdue Pharma will pay more than $8 billion and then close down the company. Its assets will be used to create a new government-controlled pharmaceutical company. The details on that are still pretty sparse. The opioid crisis has led to more than 470,000 deaths in the country since 2000. The settlement marked a huge step in the Justice Department's attempt to hold someone accountable for that. Pope Francis recently spoke up in favor of same-sex civil unions. That's a first for him and a first for any head of the Catholic Church. The Pope made the comments in a new documentary on his life called Francesco, saying people who want to enter into same-sex unions are children of God too. In the past, Pope Francis has supported some legal protections for the rights of same-sex couples, but he has opposed same-sex marriages in law. It looks like passing a second round of relief before elections was just wishful thinking on Capitol Hill. Things were looking a little promising this week, with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi working closely with the Treasury Secretary to close the gap between plans from Democrats and Republicans. They've been in negotiations over what could eventually be a roughly $2 trillion relief deal. One major holdup at this point, Senate Leader Mitch McConnell, who, according to the Washington Post, told Republican senators that any major relief deal before the election could disrupt the Senate's push to confirm Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. Today, the Senate did put forth a $500 billion skinny relief bill that they offered up back in September, which Democrats have now quickly rejected.
We intensify our efforts as a government to persuade the leading lights of the NSAS protest to suspend the protests in view of the rising insecurity in the state.
Protests over the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, also known as SARS, continue to escalate in Nigeria. Lagos has become the center of the protests against police brutality for the last 2 weeks. But things have recently turned deadly. Eyewitnesses say they saw soldiers shoot and kill multiple demonstrators, and video posted to social media seem to show that. The governor says he is open to an investigation. In the meantime, an indefinite curfew has been put in place for Lagos and nearby areas while demonstrators continue protesting and galvanizing support online. With fewer opportunities for rallies and in-person meet and greets, campaigns were forced to get creative this election cycle. We've seen the live streams and the Zoom fundraisers, but what about playing a video game with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? All for a worthy cause, of course.
Get your voting plan together. If you already got your voting plan together or you can't vote for whatever reason, help someone else get their voting plan together.
The Congresswoman played Among Us while more than 400,000 viewers streamed it. That's the third highest viewed Twitch stream for an individual gamer. In case you were wondering, Drake still holds the record for most streams on Twitch, with more than 600,000 people tuning in to watch him play Fortnite. Still, 400,000 people joining for a politician playing video games. The future is here, folks. We've heard a lot about a looming twindemic, the combination of influenza and COVID cases overwhelming the US as the weather cools and more people head inside, where both viruses like to spread. Also, twindemic might be one of the most 2020 words we've added to the lexicon. But the latest numbers from the World Health Organization may offer a bit of hope about the flu. Newsy's Lindsay Thies explains why doctors are cautiously optimistic.
The latest numbers show flu cases are lower this year globally, but experts are still worried about an influenza and COVID combination overwhelming U.S. hospitals.
Since March, the activity has been pretty low.
Dr. Wenqueen Zhang runs the WHO's Global Influenza Program. She tells Newsy globally, influenza activity is actually at lower levels than expected for this time of year.
Some of the influenza was circulating in Southeast Asia. In the West western part of Africa also, where the very low circulation of influenza B and influenza A, H3N2.
Zhang says that physical distancing, hand washing, and mask wearing in public is also likely slowing the spread of the flu. In the Southern Hemisphere, WHO data shows the season remained low or below baseline. Even with increased testing for influenza in some countries, very few detections were reported. But Dr. Zhang, like many of the health experts we've spoken to, says the influenza virus is unpredictable. That's why hospitals in the U.S., the CDC, and the American Medical Association are still worried about flu and COVID-19 colliding this fall and winter.
We have different treatments for each of these diseases that in many ways are non-overlapping.
Dr. Ben Singer at Chicago's Northwestern Medicine tells Newsy that while it's rare, patients can get COVID-19 and influenza at the same time. And the way doctors treat both viruses can also collide.
We know for patients with COVID pneumonia who have severe disease requiring oxygen that steroid medications like dexamethasone are beneficial. But there is a suggestion in the literature that steroids for severe influenza may actually be harmful.
Right now, the best thing experts are saying, keep doing what is good for slowing COVID-19, plus get a flu shot. Dr. Singer adds testing is key.
We keep emphasizing the need to have widespread access to rapid diagnostic tests so that we can rapidly and accurately determine when somebody presents with those types of symptoms who might have COVID, who might have influenza, or who might have another respiratory virus.
Right now, there's a handful of FDA-approved tests that can both screen for influenza A and B and the virus that causes COVID-19. And since the flu and COVID have almost identical symptoms, health experts say if you do feel sick, call your doctor and ask to get tested for both. Lindsay Thies, Newsy, Denver.
When you're back, we'll open up our phone line to a single caller, which may or may not be a mistake depending on how you know him. At a time when more millennials are associated with leaving religion, a study by the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate says more Catholic women are considering religious life than the previous generation. And when we want to know about millennial nuns, this is Christian.
Now, did I hear somebody wants another Sister Act sequel?
Literally nobody asked for that.
Okay, well, that's a bummer. Maybe you can meet me halfway. What if I told you I spent a week in a convent following a woman named Emily Persichetti to learn why someone would enter religious life?
Then I'd say a prayer for that convent content you're about to deliver us.
So you're on track to take a vow of obedience, poverty, and chastity, right? Yeah, I think the pandemic forced me to do the same.
I'm understanding it a little more.
Right. A woman walks into a church. If it's not Sunday, you could assume someone's a bride, someone died, or it's any given holiday gone awry.
And you get cigarettes.
You probably wouldn't assume a woman walks into a church to become a nun. A 2017 survey done by Catholics for Catholics asked 1,500 self-identifying Catholic women if they ever considered religious life. 88%, yeah, they said nope to the Pope. But 12% said yes to the bless. The survey assumes it's equivalent to 3.5 million Catholic women who have considered becoming a nun. That's up 5% from the previous generation. One of those women is Emily Persichetti. 25 years old, a pediatric nurse, lives in a small town outside Chicago. Now I know what you're thinking. A modern millennial woman becoming a nun?
It's bound to be a bit of a culture shock, May.
But Emily is unlike her peers. She was called by the Lord, and we get to eavesdrop.
No, thank you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Thank you.
It's the Sister Act sequel you didn't ask for, so by the power vested in me.
All right, announcers ready to eat. Come in.
Come in.
Welcome to Mission of Our Lady of the Angels, a church that in late 2019 received 3 new postulants, aka nuns in training, which is a huge number for any convent. This is where Emily will potentially spend the next 7 years of discernment to lead up to a day like this, a final vows ceremony. It's kind of a marriage to Jesus, where nuns literally lay their lives on the line for the Lord.
Sister Jess made her final vows, so that was about 7 years of preparation. And essentially she has committed to being part of this community and being of service for the rest of her life.
So when you saw that, was there like any inkling of you that wanted just to like go download Tinder and swipe right on a bunch of guys? I mean,
No, not at all. It was quite the opposite. That is something that I'm aspiring to. That's why I'm here.
Right.
And just seeing the joy on her face, she knows that that is where the Lord has called her, and she's saying yes, and she's going to do it.
Let's talk about love a little bit. What is your relationship with love?
Yeah, I mean, I've felt loved my whole life. My parents, you know, they've loved me super well, and that's why I want to be here. Just as an extension of that love.
What about love with like another individual person? Like, because when you do become a nun and commit to this, you commit to being alone.
I mean, certainly you do commit to being single.
Celibate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And I think people have a misconception that, you know, sexuality is like the primary way that we can experience love in our lives. But I haven't found that to be true.
Okay.
I think the most authentic expression of love comes from self-sacrifice and giving, and just being in relationship with another person and wanting their good.
That's so interesting that you phrase it that way, wanting their good. What do you mean by that?
Wanting the best for that other person. And to me, as someone of faith, that means wanting them to be in relationship with the Lord, and having them have that connection and being able to experience the love of God through other people, and certainly directly as well through experiences of prayer.
You have now committed to poverty, is it chastity, and obedience? I hear those 3 words and I'm a little scared.
Right, I'm scared too.
Yeah, right. So that's normal. It's normal to be scared about that.
Yeah, just knowing that it's part of something much bigger. This is not our home. Like, we are not made to be here on earth forever. Like, our time here is limited, and the whole goal is to point people to something bigger. If a few days in the convent teaches you anything, it's that we shouldn't assume religious life is just about sacrifice. Rather, in Emily's case, it's an attempt to restore what matters in the world. In the last year, she says she's grown as a woman of God, serving a community that's seeking social justice as a pandemic shut down the planet. Yet Sister Emily is at peace, and her joy unshakable. To me, that's kind of something I've been reflecting on, as well as this difference between joy and happiness. I've really kind of started to internalize it, that joy cannot be taken away. Happiness, that kind of oscillates and can depend on your circumstances, but when you have true joy, you're able to rest in the knowledge that God is there and that He loves you and cares for you no matter what is going on in the world, whether it's a pandemic or social unrest or whatever it is. And for me, I feel like I'm more myself than I've ever been. I think just being here has just allowed me to come more into myself and the person that God's calling me to be.
So, fascinating story as always, Cody. And I'm not just saying that to gas you up. I'm kind of curious to know, what is it that surprised you the most in doing this reporting?
Yeah, I think the notion that religious life is all about sacrifice. I think I was expecting to come across these women who don't do much, when that couldn't be further from the truth. They are incredibly filled with purpose.
And where can we get more content like this?
You can head to Newsy's YouTube page to watch the full documentary. This was a bit of a preview, and you can also check it out at newsy.com.
Wonderful.
Oh, Christian, one more thing.
Yeah?
Your mother wants to know the last time you went to church.
No, she doesn't, because I'm not going to disappoint her on this show. So
I don't think you know how many group messages I'm in.
You know what? Best wishes and warmest regards.
All right, peace be with you.
An estimated 13% of Black Americans are eligible to vote in this year's election. So how exactly are the president and his opponent appealing to us? Last week, we took a moment to collectively gasp over the announcement that Ice Cube had consulted with the Trump administration over a plan aimed at helping Black Americans. And to be clear, that was mainly due to Cube's constant criticism of the Trump administration. But it's unsurprising that the Trump and Biden camps are making their pitches to Black voters, with an emphasis on Black men so close to this year's general election. Newsy's Amber Strong explains.
With African Americans making up about 13% of eligible voters and 2 weeks left to the election, both President Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden are working to win them over. Both campaigns released competing plans on their vision for Black America. There's Trump's Platinum Plan and Biden's Lift Every Voice, titled after the Black national anthem. Lift every voice and sing. Here's a side-by-side comparison. On criminal justice, President Trump wants to increase the hiring of rehabilitated individuals with criminal records. Biden wants to decriminalize the use of cannabis and end all incarceration for drug use alone. On education, President Trump wants to close failing schools and instead give students and their families school choice through vouchers. Biden plans to call for universal pre-kindergarten for all 3- and 4-year-olds. On COVID-19, Biden plans to call for a rent freeze for qualifying individuals throughout the pandemic and cancel $10,000 of federal student loan debt. President Trump's plan doesn't mention COVID-19.
Arrest the president. You got the evidence.
President Trump's plan reportedly used pieces of rapper Ice Cube's contract with Black America. Ice Cube has made it clear he is not endorsing the president, and his team presented the plan to both campaigns, but he questions both parties' loyalty to Black Americans.
I'm not on Team Blue, not on Team Red.
So then I have that wrong.
I'm an independent person, and I believe that's what Black people need to do, is become independent.
While the majority of Black voters went with Hillary Clinton in 2016, Trump picked up 14% of Black men, but less than 2% of Black women. The subject of Black men supporting the president has been controversial, with the hashtag #BlameBlackMen trending on Twitter earlier this week.
Go, shorty. It's your birthday.
After rapper 50 Cent, who is opposed to Biden's plan to raise taxes on the wealthy, posted the words "Vote for Trump" on social media. Critics lambasted the post, pointing to issues like the president's response to 2017's Charlottesville rally.
It's difficult to say we're not monolithic, but when people exhibit behavior that is clearly by definition not monolithic, we shun them.
Sure, Michael Singleton worked on Mitt Romney and Ben Carson's presidential campaigns. He's since left the GOP, but says data shows Trump's policies on the economy and criminal justice reform are resonating with some younger Black men.
That Super Bowl ad with Alice Johnson, believe it or not, they did focus groups on this stuff across the country that actually showed that there were Black men who said, you know what? I mean, I like the guy, but this is something that is directly important to me.
There is no good reason not to vote.
The Biden camp released a series of ads targeting Black men and the president's response to COVID-19.
Now, I'm a lifelong Republican, and I'm still a Republican.
This week, the Republican Party's first Black chairman, Michael Steele, announced he's voting for Biden. Regardless, African Americans and people in general seem to be very enthusiastic going into this year's election, with record numbers already casting their votes. Amber Strong, Newsy, Northern Virginia.
If you have a moment, feel free to holler at us on Twitter using the hashtag #NewsyInTheLoop. You can actually try it now if you'd like. You got a few moments. We've seen new developments in the case of the police killing of Breonna Taylor this week. A Kentucky judge ordered the release of grand jury proceedings, and an anonymous person from that grand jury said the group did not agree that the police shooting was justified. Taylor's family has demanded transparency from the Louisville Metro Police Department, and they've gotten it in some ways. Newsy and the Kentucky Center for Investigative Reporting spoke to families of other people killed by LMPD since 2015. They say they've been demanding the same treatment and have gotten nothing but silence. Here's that report.
He had a huge heart. He really did. Even when he wasn't doing so well, he would try to help somebody.
Isaac Jackson struggled with mental health after a car accident, his family said. But on the night of April 25th, 2018, Jackson showed up to his parents' house acting differently.
He had begun to literally destroy everything in the living room. I was bleeding, my arm was bleeding because I had been stabbed. My mom decided, let's call the police.
She's doing my family. Jackson was shot and killed by a Louisville Metro police officer that night. The Jackson family went to the police station and were questioned for several hours. Aside from picking up the police report a couple weeks later, they say they never heard from LMPD again.
There were no updates or anything made. We didn't get contacted.
As the Jackson family is watched, prosecutors and police release details of the Breonna Taylor case to the public. They and other families are still waiting for answers, more than 2 years after their loved ones were shot and killed by LMPD.
Wow, that kind of should have happened in our situation.
LMPD has a clearly defined process to criminally investigate officer-involved shootings, but they aren't required to share anything with families of those killed by its officers, and often they don't. Newsy and the Kentucky Center for Investigative Reporting reached out to representatives and family members of all 19 people killed by LMPD since 2015. 11 shared their stories. Most said they were left in the dark about how police were handling their cases.
I just found out today that certain people were supposed to do investigations. I had no idea that was supposed to happen.
He got shot on Thursday, and the next day was when I found out, Friday. They never did contact us.
He just said he got shot and killed. Coroner didn't tell us the police was involved. We didn't find out till the news came on.
Let my mother know what's going on.
Yeah. Before the world
knows.
6 families have been waiting for months, and in some cases years, for the police to finish their investigations. Until Newsy and KYCIR told them, they had no idea their cases were closed.
I still carry the detectives' cards in my pocket. They just said that I would hear from them, and I never heard anything.
Tammy Riggs is the mother of Billy Ray Riggs. He was shot by an LMPD officer during a narcotic traffic stop in February 2018 after police and another passenger exchanged gunfire.
I got an alert on my phone that a police officer had been shot. And I watched it for hours, and I didn't know it was my son.
Meanwhile, Billy was taken to the University of Louisville hospital and put on life support. Tammy says her daughter learned on Facebook the next day, and that's who told her, not police or the hospital. She says when she finally saw her son, it had been about 24 hours since he'd been shot by LMPD.
Because right now I have nothing. I don't have a clue as to what happened, how it happened.
Since the day she took her son off life support, Tammy Riggs has been waiting for answers. She didn't even know her son's case was closed until we gave her a letter we obtained through Open Records, dated August 2018.
This is 2020, so it's over 2 years ago.
In Kentucky, prosecutors are required to update victims on the status of their criminal cases. But a spokesperson for the Attorney General told Newsy and KYCIR, you're only legally considered a victim once charges are filed. Since 2004, no LMPD officer has been charged for fatally shooting a civilian, which means none of the people killed or their families we spoke with are considered victims. And so while Kentucky law requires police to return a victim's property, it also doesn't apply to families like Riggs. She's still waiting to get her son's belongings back.
I just want the little stuff, maybe his cigarette lighter and his wallet and his cell phone.
Newsy and KYCIR found LMPD's public-facing database offers no help either. Currently, 9 cases listed as open are actually closed. In response to our reporting, both the offices of Mayor Greg Fisher and the Jefferson County Commonwealth's Attorney Tom Wine told Newsy and KYCIR that they would look into their procedures. In an email, Mayor Fisher's office wrote that we need a more consistent and formal protocol so that no family experiences this again.
For my parents, this is a kid that you raised in church who got scholarships for college. This is a kid who was, full of life. Just to be able to get some closure, I think that would have helped them out a lot.
Carrie Cochran, Newsy, Louisville, Kentucky.
That's it for us, gang. As always, thanks for watching. We'll be back with more in the loop tomorrow, same time, same place. Top stories from Newsy are headed your way right now.